Hello, everybody. Nice to see you back. Today, I would like to talk about carbohydrates and insulin and how both have a huge impact on our weight gain or weight loss. So, if you are one of those many people that have tried to lose weight and failed each time despite a healthy diet, despite lots of exercises, in this video, I explain everything why it didn't work in the past. So, upfront, weight loss has nothing to do with calories, with willpower, and has only very little to do with exercises. Okay. So, as usual, the following video is no individual medical advice, it's for educational purposes only. So if you have significant weight problems, please see your low-carb practitioner or your low-carb dietitian or nutritionist or a practitioner experienced in functional medicine. And as usual, I always link everything, all the research, all the scientific evidence, I link that all down below in the description box. Okay, I hope you find this video helpful. So why is obesity a problem? So obesity is very strongly related to diabetes. So if you gain weight after the age of 18, that's a very strong predictor for the development of diabetes. What I'm talking about type 2 diabetes, I should say that. So if you just gain 5 to 8 kilograms, your chances of developing type 2 diabetes has increased by 90%. And if you have more than 35 kilos too much on your body, so then your risk has increased by a slashing 17,300%. So obesity is a problem, especially when it comes to diabetes. But obesity is also strongly related to inflammation, which is the perfect breeding ground for diabetes and insulin resistance and atherosclerosis, giving you the heart attack or the strokes or the cancer or the Alzheimer's. And also obesity is strongly related to insulin resistance. So especially that is another breeding ground for type 2 diabetes, cardiovascular issues like heart attacks or strokes and cancer and Alzheimer's. But inflammation and insulin resistance are two big topics, and I'll cover them in a different video. So everyone should be afraid of insulin resistance as much as they are afraid of diabetes. So let's have a look at our world data. So this is from the WHO, extracting data of obese people, also overweight or obese people, 1975. That was the year I was born, so we had a few obese people in the world. Then we move on to 1986. I was just in the sixth grade, so it's been creeping up. 1995, that's when I finished my high school. It's becoming more prevalent. 2005, that was the year when I did my master's in biological sciences. It's still creeping up, especially in the Western world. And 2016, that's the last data, it's significantly increased, especially in the developed countries. So I was living almost 10 years in Australia by then, and Australia is really not much different to Germany or the rest of the developed world. So what makes me particularly sad is that our children are affected too. So children are as much part of the obesity pandemic as the adults. So here's a graph showing kids between the age of 2 and 4 years old who are defined as overweight. And I have teenagers in my clinic, and they are not the bad guys. You may think, oh yeah, they eat lollies and chocolate and all the time, and they have the soft drinks all the time. But no, these kids are not the bad kids, nor are their parents the bad parents. They have always been looked at healthy diets and tried to have the best. And yet I have got teenagers in my clinic that are morbidly obese and diabetic. So obesity goes up. Like it's a pandemic. It goes worldwide. It goes like a hurricane of the category 5 throughout our world. Despite memberships going up, despite we have such a huge amount of weight loss programs, our health awareness is higher than it has ever been, and yet what's happening. So we are giving out that mantra, eat less, exercise more. It's all about portion control. And are we winning? No. Uh, it's it's not working. So there's actually a study saying, okay, 99% of the time you actually fail following this advice. So what is the problem? Did we all go into sudden global, simultaneous, coordinated lack of willpower? I mean, that's like pretty unlikely. When they suggested smoking is bad and stop smoking, smoking rates went significantly down, and all of a sudden we seem to ignore all the good guidelines. Well, that's very unlikely. So maybe we should stop blaming the victim and we should look at our advice we're giving. So now I want to go into a couple of problems with the advice we're giving. So here is problem number one, our current food pyramid. So that was established in the 1970s or 80s, depending which country you're in, but that's pretty much globally the same. So we have, at the bottom, we have all these sort of healthy carbohydrates, complex, and we should eat preferably from homemade products. Then we should eat lots of fruits and vegetables. We should have only a moderate amount of meat and dairy. And of course, we should minimize the fat. So fat is at the tip of our food pyramid, so we should have only very little of it. Is there any scientific evidence for those recommendations? The answer is no, nothing solid. But that's a different video, how we got here. So for this video, I would like to focus on the carbohydrates because they are playing a major role in weight gain. So it may come at no surprise, carbohydrates are actually just sugars. And here's a link to a web page done by Dr. David Unwin, who is a British low-carb practitioner who made the effort to tell the people, okay, this is how much sugar you're eating when you have this food. And it's available in many other languages, so he tried to reach as many people as possible. Let's have a look at a couple of his charts. So here he compares the types of bread. So everybody knows that cakes and lollies and biscuits and cookies and ice cream, they are full of sugar. So that's not where he's going into. So everyone knows whatever tastes sweet is sugar. But hardly anyone knows that if you eat bread, it doesn't matter, white bread or brown bread, you have with one slice of white bread, you have what about almost 4 teaspoons full of sugar. If you have got brown bread, it's 3 and a little bit. So it's not much of a difference what type of bread you're eating. It's all breaking down to sugar. Your body doesn't care where it's coming from. So let's have a look at some other foods. Do you think rice is healthy for you? You're consuming, with just one normal portion of rice, you're consuming about 10 teaspoons of sugar. That's the equivalent of just one portion of rice. You think potatoes are great for you? Just look here, 9 and a bit teaspoons of sugar. That's what you're having when you have an enormous portion of potatoes. You think bananas are great? Bananas are full of sugar. Okay. So I just thought I'd clarify this because next I want to look at what's happening to the carbohydrates we are consuming. So here's our food pyramid again, and I'm focusing on the carbs for this sort of process. So we eat all these carbohydrates and they all get broken down into sugar. So then they enter our bloodstream, and once they're in the bloodstream, they're actually toxic. So sugar is forming something what we call advanced glycated end products, which means they stick to everything. If you have ever touched honey, it's highly, highly sticky and it's really hard to get rid of it. So that's why if you have got too much sugar in your blood, you die in a very short time. So because it clogs up your kidneys, it clogs up your arteries, it gives you eye damage, everything. So that's all the known diseases that are happening when you're type 2 diabetic. But we're not that stupidly designed. So we have a pancreas, and that secretes insulin. As soon as our body is sensing there's sugar in the blood, the pancreas secretes insulin. So insulin has got a lot of functions, but one of the main functions are to get the sugar out of the blood into the cells. And here's what happens. So the liver can convert a bit of the sugar into glycogen. That's the safe storage form of sugar. It converts a little bit into, it utilizes the energy to basically make proteins. So insulin stimulates protein making from the food that we're eating into our own proteins. But then it does something else. So once we have too much carbs in our food, a process called de novo lipogenesis is happening. And that means new fat making. So the liver converts all the carbohydrates that are in excess into fat. So what was once a sugar is now a fat. So a calorie is not a calorie. So what also happens when insulin is elevated, the liver is unable to release that fat and to release that glycogen. So insulin basically blocks the liver. It takes everything in. It makes the liver taking everything in and not letting anything out. Same happens in our muscles. So the muscles can store glycogen, about 1,000 to 1,500 calories worth of energy. But the liver can't, the muscles can't make new fat out of it. So the muscles can only store. And as long as insulin is present, the glycogen is locked in the muscles. So next, what happens in our fat cells? So our fat cells turn everything coming from carbohydrates, which was converted into glucose. It turns all the glucose into fat. So fat cells perform de novo lipogenesis as well. And as long as insulin is present, the fat cell is unable to let go of its contents. So at some point, the fat cells say, hey, we are full. So via the hormone leptin, it signals the brain, hey, I'm full. We don't need to eat anymore. And here's another thing. So if you're overweight, so there's a strong correlation between obesity and leptin resistance, which means leptin is nowhere near as powerful as it used to be, and your brain is just not getting the signal. Your brain doesn't understand that you're full. You keep hungry. You are hungry for much longer. And another thing happens. As soon as the insulin levels are dropping just a little bit, your brain gets a signal saying, danger, we should eat more. So your hormone called ghrelin goes up. That's your hunger hormone. So you can easily test it. You go to McDonald's, you have a Big Mac meal with the burger and with some Coke and with some French fries, and your insulin levels will go skyrocketing high. So you just consumed about 2,000 calories worth of energy. And then what happens? These calories should last you for longer than a day. So what happens next? You are hungry after 4 hours. So calories do not matter. Your body has no means of calculating calories. It's all about what the hormones are doing with that calorie. So let's zoom into the fat cells. So that's all about weight gain and weight loss. And so I want to focus on the fat cell. So I'm sorry if it gets a little bit technical here, but obesity is always and everywhere associated with an insulin problem. And here's why. So here comes the sugar. It goes into the fat, and then it gets converted into glycerol. That's how the fat is stored. That's how the sugar gets processed. So then the triglycerides come from the liver. The triglycerides are coming from the carbohydrates as well. That's the fat the liver has converted from the carbohydrates. And because it can't really go easily into the fat cell, it needs a hormone called lipoprotein lipase, which splits it open to glycerol, fatty acids, and then they can easily go into the fat cell, where the fatty acids and the glycerol get back together into triglycerides. So the triglycerides are the safe storage form of energy. That's what our body is doing. That's what our body wants to have for the bad times. So all the energy from the carbohydrates get stored as fat in our fat cells. So if we want to utilize that fat, it's very simple. It just activates a hormone called hormone-sensitive lipase, and then the fatty acids can be utilized as energy in our metabolism. And here's the problem. As long as insulin is present, the fat cell is unable to release its contents. So because that hormone is blocked. So what it means, insulin is a fat storage hormone. Insulin is the problem. So a fat cell cannot grow in the absence of insulin. So insulin makes putting all the glucose and all the triglycerides into the fat cell, and insulin blocks it. You can be starving, your fat cells won't grow. You can be swimming in an ocean of calories. If it's not coming from carbohydrates, your fat cell won't get bigger. So a little bit less technical, high levels of insulin make us store. So insulin is the storing and building hormone. And if insulin levels are low, well, then that's sort of, then we have actually access to our storage and to build it, to utilize our stores for hunger times. So if insulin levels are low, our bodies are allowed to release that energy. So there's another trick here. So insulin, we know it's for insulin promotes fat storage, but it's all about location, location, location. So we have subcutaneous fat, which is the fat that primarily accumulates in our skin, in our subcutaneous tissues, and then we have the visceral fats, which accumulates around our organs, and that is the much more dangerous fat. Visceral fat is much more harmful because it promotes much higher inflammation and oxidative stress, and you have got a much higher chance of getting metabolically really unhealthy. So how does it look in real life? So the subcutaneous fat is basically around your hips and your buttocks. So it is the unsightly. It doesn't look as nice, and we say, oh, okay, so these people are more like pear-shaped. And the visceral fat, it's more like the apple shape. So it's around your belly, and you can easily test it. Just grab it, grab your fat. If it's soft and you can pinch it, then it's most likely subcutaneous fat, which is not as dangerous. Or if it's hard and you find it really not easy to grab it, then it's most likely visceral fat, and that's the worst. So where you store your fat is really not up to you. It largely depends on your sex and your genes. Now we've established insulin is the problem, but how does it go up? Let's have a look at insulin and how insulin is influenced by our food choices. So if we eat carbohydrates, which gets all converted into sugar, and because sugar is so toxic in our blood, we have a huge spike of insulin because all that sugar needs to go. So when we have proteins, well, the insulin levels are not going as high. We still need insulin. So in this case, we need insulin to make our own protein. So it's not about getting rid of the sugar, we just need our own proteins. And then we have fats. That's the stuff we should have at least of. So what does fat do to insulin levels? Hardly anything. So I hope this is clear that we can significantly influence the level of insulin with our food choices. And since insulin influences our fat storage and not the calories, we can influence that big time just with what we're eating. So what else is a problem? So it's not how do we keep the insulin levels up over the day? So here's a modern day of eating. So at the moment, we are recommended to eat 3 meals a day, breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and have snacks in between. That's the current recommendation. So in this case, insulin never goes down. So we are always in the storing mode. We're never really using it. So especially if that's combined with carbohydrate-rich foods, which makes us hungry all the time, there's really no chance of ever having the insulin levels down. And here's another thing. So sugar has got the same influence on our brain, on our reward centers in the brain as heroin. So ask the food industries. They know exactly how to find the bliss point. It means, oh yeah, that's sort of like enough dopamine expression in our brains to make us happy and then keep us hungry all the time because our brain wants more. So the more carbs you eat, the more hungry you will be. So as a result, from this constant eating, we are from morning to late, we are in a constant state of high insulin. And over time, we gain weight as our body has never got the chance to actually utilize its storage. So it's not about calories, it's all about the hormones. So you can test it as well. You can go to an all-you-can-eat buffet and you're filled to the rim. And then I offer you a 500 calories worth of ice cream. Would you say yes or no? Yeah, I can still fit that in. Or I offer you a 500 calories worth of steak. Would you take it? Most likely not. And that's what it is. Our body has absolutely no idea how to count calories. It's all about what happens to that calories and how our hormones respond to those calories. Did we always eat 3 meals a day with snacks in between? Just ask your grandparents. Most likely not. Most people in the past had 1 or 2 free meals a day. And when I was a child and I was asking for a snack or I was a bit hungry before dinner, my mom wouldn't give me a snack because otherwise I would spoil dinner or lunch, whatever was next. So even though the people in the 50s and 60s, they did have the odd ice cream or the odd toast. So that wasn't a problem. It's just they didn't eat all the time. They didn't have 3 meals a day and snacks in between. Parents did not chase after their kids have enough snacks in their bags. Eating all the time is a huge issue, and that's one of the wrong advices as well. So I hope I could show you that insulin is the main problem. Insulin is the major hormone determining if we lose weight or gain weight. And I hope you could understand that even the healthiest foods in our food pyramid, at the bottom of the food pyramid, are not that healthy after all. And that the problem is the carbohydrates. So I hope you could also understand that eating all the time is not the solution either. Even eating only small amounts each time and reducing the calories, it's not going to work because your body will reduce its metabolic rate to adjust for the reduced calorie intake. So that's why eating less, exercising more does not work. So in my next video, I'll show you what to do and how to tackle the problem of insulin. I hope to see you next time.